Welcome back to the 10 Adventures podcast. One thing I hear quite often is the challenge of making a decision to go on a big trip or to live a more authentic lifestyle. Over the coming months, I'll be talking with people who are living different lives that are authentic and important to them, often that prioritize the outdoors, adventure, or travel, or just focusing on having better and more experiences with loved ones. But before we get to talking to people living these lives, I thought a good first step would be to talk about how to make the change to a different life. So today we have professional life coach Beth Creedon on the podcast, and Beth will share some insight into how to take the first step. Hi, Beth. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Richard. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, I'm really excited to chat about this. And before we talk about how others can think of this, can you maybe share a little bit about your background and how you help people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very fortunate to be introduced to coaching when I was just 23. I'm 46 now, so half my life I've been doing this now. And it really allowed me to realize I had choices in my life. I wasn't just reacting to my circumstances and then going, well, because this happened to me, now I'm stuck here, or now this is how my life's going to be. It just really opened up what was possible. So I set up my own business. I was really into sustainable food. My partner and I set up an organic veg box delivery company, like buying from local farmers, local growers. But there was always this itch of like people coming to me and saying, yeah, but you do some cool stuff and like you don't seem to be that afraid. I was like, oh no, I'm still afraid. I just don't want it to stop me with what I'm doing. So people would kind of come to me for advice. And then I realized just how not satisfying that was for them or me, because advice giving just isn't. And then I did my coach training and realized that being able to coach somebody to their answers was so much cooler all around. So that's what I did.
It's interesting you mentioned this, giving advice, because I have 3 kids and my oldest is a tween, so he's almost a teenager. And I just read a book called The Advice Trap, and it's all about how don't give people the answers. I still default to, hey, here's the answer, but it's so much more effective to help people understand, what the answer should be, let them make the decision. And I'm just conscious very soon my kids are going to stop listening to me. And so
Absolutely.
If my discussion can just help them as opposed to tell them, I feel like that's going to really help just me be a better parent. But yeah, I can imagine in what you're doing, helping people have these self-realizations is way more effective than just giving them the answer.
Absolutely. And it's so inspiring for me too, to kind of explore other people's mindsets and just go, hey, what have you got in there? Like, tell me your deepest, darkest dreams and your brightest fears, like doing it that way around. Like, actually, what's the most bright fear in your life? Like, what's the kind of darkest dream? Like actually exploring that rather than just going, tell me all the like amazing dreams and all the darkest fears. Like, you kind of just mix it up a bit already and make it be able to shift people's perspective on how they're thinking about things and kind of question it and just like play with it a little bit. Like, in my opinion, we just make it all up. We make up our ideas about what's possible from our past and from our experience, but it's just like shining a torchlight in a huge warehouse. Like, it's only that very tiny beam of light of our experience that we think is what life's about. And there's so much more that's possible, and we just don't see it.
So I'm excited to talk more about that. But first I want to talk about maybe that first step and how to help people figure out what they want to do with life. And maybe the framework is, I know lots of people who aren't happy with their life, but they maybe don't know how, what'll be happy. They fell into a job after university, they got a house and a mortgage, and 20 years in, they don't really like their job. They don't like what they do, but they have all these commitments and they just know they're not on a fulfilling or on authentic path for them, but they also don't have a vision for, what they want to do. And they usually talk to me about travel. Like, they have these dreams of exploring the world, but, they can't do that. And so what are the steps to help people create a clear vision and, understand what the right path for them is?
Okay, so there's a couple of ways you could play with that. So one way that I do is to think about, I call it the Merlin Principle. So I was taught this as a formula of how to jump beyond your present circumstances and think about what are the things that when you daydream about retiring and about kind of not having loads and loads of responsibilities anymore, imagine what you think that life will be like. So really picture it, really visualize exactly how you want that to be. Who knows how old that will be? Just get them to pick a number about what they think is that time of life. And then imagine the mindset that you will be in when you reach that. Like when you just have nailed the things that you've always just thought, by the time I'm X age, I won't be worrying about that anymore. I won't be thinking about that anymore. My responsibilities will be like this, and I will be, therefore, like this. So I get them to think about that. And then we come back to the present day, and we go, okay, for you to hit that marker at, let's just say 70, 75, 70, for the sake of argument. Maybe the person's 40 in front of me, and I'm like, okay, for you to hit that at 70, what do you need to do today to get there? And actually, most people think, wow, there's not that much that I have to change now, but there are some really, really, really big things that need to be different. So I then go, okay, so to get there by 70, okay, so then what would you have to do by the time you're 50 to get there at 70? And we just kind of bring it back that way around. So the reason it's called the Merlin Principle, I can't remember who invented the system. It's taken from the book by a guy, I think he's called E.B. White, who wrote it about Merlin the magician. And he lived his life backwards. So that's where the idea came from. The other thing I invite my clients to think about is just to go, okay, when was the last time you did something just because you wanted to do it? And lots of people find it quite difficult, because there are so many societal expectations, like you were saying, like you do this, you get a job, you fall into this, it all kind of just happens along the way. And I just get them to have a better relationship with their ideas about what their choices are. So go, okay, what are you going to have for dinner? Are you really choosing that because you really want to eat that? Or is it just the circumstances that surround that? The kids will eat it, it's quick. Like, what do you actually really want to eat for dinner? And just get them to do small steps. Because most people, I get a lot of clients come to me, not all of them, lots of clients come to me, just feeling a bit not great. They're like, I'm not enjoying what's happening in my life. I know I could do something better. What could it be? I'm not sure what that is or what that looks like. So, on many occasions, it's because they have listened to what they should do. I'm doing inverted commas, hand gestures at this point. What should I do? And in my opinion, there just is no should. It's all made up. We have so many ideas about this is the right path, this is the wrong path. There's so much judgment involved, and actually we've just lost touch with what we want. So if people aren't sure about what they want, I get them to go back to basics and just make some really basic choices. So go to the basics or do the big leap and do the Merlin Principle.
And so what if someone maybe isn't thinking, here's where I want to be when I'm 75, but they're in their 30s and, maybe they're stuck and it's not, I want to do this when I retire. It's, how do I want to live the next 30 years of my life? How would you help somebody like that?
Yeah, I think I've not explained the principle correctly. So you imagine what you want by the time you're 70, and then you work backwards to imagine that your accomplishments, everything you've done, and then you come back to the present day and just go, okay, so I'll give you an example. The first time I did it, I was sitting in a room with like 100 people. It was like, right. And I think I was about 25. And it was like, okay, so imagine myself, I'm surrounded by countryside, beautiful house, it's paid for. I've got passive income, everything's gorgeous, but what have I achieved? And it was like, right, I know that I've lived in different countries. I've got my black belt in kickboxing that I knew I'd already started. I wasn't sure whether I was going to go for it or not. And I was like, all those little bits of things, like they were the things. So I came back and went, okay, to reach that by 75, I know I need to do this by 50. And there are some things in everyone's life that they think, if I haven't done that thing by the time I'm that age, I'll be really annoyed at myself. Most of them are mindset things. Like if I haven't stopped worrying about what people think of me by the time I'm 70, I'll be really, really upset with myself. So what do you need to do to not feel like that? Like if I haven't just stayed and, seen the sunrise in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, if I don't do that by the time I'm 50, I'll be sad. So it's having those little bits of things. Most people have a spark of something. I never believe it, actually, when people say, I don't know what I want to do, because there is stuff in there. There's just a lot of noise of shoulds or can'ts or I'm scared. And we talked about a little bit of scared before, didn't we?
It's funny. I have a strategy background, education-wise, and what you're describing is actually a tool called your future envision state, where you say, here's where our company is right now, and in 20 years, what does our company look like? And you get a team of executives to work together, and you realize quite often, actually, that different leaders have totally different viewpoints. And thinking now, you probably deal with quite often where you'll have, partners, and one will want to do A and one will see a totally different life. And I imagined that would probably lead to a lot of conflict if, people have totally different views on how they want to live the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and within partnerships and within marriages, you're a bit like, oh, you want that? Maybe we should have had this conversation before we got married. What is that? So I think there's always a piece of something, and I think there's enough space. So one thing I really enjoyed doing, actually just at the end of 2020, I went and had a whole week by myself in the woods on Dartmoor in southern England. And part of that was having 4 days by myself with a bivy bag and water and a tarp, and that was it. And there was no books, no writing material. You're just there, and it was like, right, you're just left with yourself. I was so scared. I was on private land. We have no big animals here in the UK, and I was just confronted by the whole thing. And I think the guy who ran it was really into kind of tree spirits and stuff. He was quite kind of, quirky, folky out there, and he really scared us. There's tree spirits are gonna come and get you. I was like, oh my goodness, this is ridiculous and terrifying. But it was kind of mystical. It was mystical. I was left with myself. I had a really big breakthrough in the first night I was there, just on a sense of trying to control things and going, okay, I can't control what happens here. I'm just going to be here and see what happens and enjoy the ride. And it was such a profound breakthrough on the first night. And I remember this flock of, it was like the evening because it was in the middle of the summer, and mid-July. And this flock of birds came through and kind of punctuated that moment of clarity. And it was so beautiful, make of it what you will. But it was such a beautiful moment of okay, I can either really suffer this and be scared of this, or I can enjoy the ride. And it was nothing to do with anything that I could control anymore. And that was great. And that just really set up the rest of the 4 days of my experience there. And to enjoy my own company and to really ask myself, okay, well, what's next? And I thought it was all to do with my business. And I was like, what's going to be next? And there was such a lot of mother imagery happening for the next 4 days. This baby deer came and visited me every day. And it was it just came to my camp and we kind of hung around a bit. And then I left a note for our kind of supporters saying, I know this is probably part of the thing, but there is a baby without its mother here and I'm kind of worried about it now. They were like, don't worry about it. It's fine. Just let it be. And then, I have an 11-year-old now, but then she was about 8 and, I didn't want any more kids. So I was like, I'm done. this is great. But all this mother imagery was coming up, and I was like, okay, so the next thing is going to be, so like when I was left by myself with nothing to think about, just me in the woods, the images that kept coming up were all about being a mother. And I was like, okay, so less business, more parenting. That's what's coming up for me. That's what I'm really interpreting when I sit and be still for 4 days. 6 weeks later, I was pregnant with our second child, completely out of the blue. I was just like, well, I didn't see that one coming. So that was the maddest thing. So one of the things I also recommend with clients, especially super busy clients, people like high up CEOs, business managers, loads of different people, business owner, anyone who's busy parents, anyone who's like, I have no space. I'm like, you have to go away by yourself without your phone for 2 nights. And if you think you haven't got enough time, you need to go for a week. Like, go and just stop and give yourself some space and go and just see what is in your mind, because you do have an idea. It's just you're putting blockages up. And the biggest amount of space you can give yourself, the better.
It's interesting as you're talking, I was thinking of spending time in the woods or, going on these long bike trips, you have this time in the Canadian Rockies, phones don't work. So you have this forced disconnection, and there's so many things you realize. And even a lot of times at lunch, I'll go for a walk with my wife. There's a big park near our house. And just that, even something simple as just going for a walk without your phones, this time without distraction, it allows your mind to breathe. And, a 1 hour walk, you can get some aha moments. But then, a 3 or 4 day backpacking trip, you end up just having these, relaxed conversations. There's no reason or anything to talk about. You're side by side as opposed to kind of facing right on. So your mind's kind of wandering, looking around, and kind of what you say, just things come out. And, a lot of times I'll be like, holy crow, that problem's solved. And it's something, had been kind of a low level problem forever, but I feel like we're so busy, we're so distracted. We're always, I like watching stupid videos on YouTube. And so it's like a lot of times I'll be like, I just spent 2 hours watching guys build cabins and do holidays. I just watch it. What the hell am I doing? Like, why am I not reading a book? But all this leads to us kind of constantly being bombarded, never just having this time for our minds to take over and start solving problems, or even, raising awareness of problems.
I know I believe this, but I think sometimes I'll kind of go to the internet to try and fix a problem. And actually, instead of just going away and being quiet and cutting out the noise and actually going, okay, what if I was just to give myself the space and not trying to kind of deliberately go and fix something, but what if I just was quiet for a bit and then saw what happened? So again, during the pandemic, we live in the countryside here in the UK, in Yorkshire, and it's very hilly. And well, I was homeschooling my daughter, and I got to go for a walk for an hour a day. So it would, like, first thing in the morning, beautiful sunshine, and I would go for a walk every day. And I'd always have a pen stuck in my hair, because I had so many aha moments. Like, pretty much every time I went for a walk, it was just like, oh, that's a great idea. That I just would, I would get frustrated if I didn't have my pen, and I didn't want to take my phone and everything. And I would just come back sometimes with my hand just scrawled in stuff of like, that would be great, that would be great, that would be great. And it was so rich. And I would kind of go to bed excited about going for my walk. What am I going to come up with today? And it was so wonderful. And I spent so much less time on my phone because I given myself that space in the morning. I then had an agenda for the rest of the day. I kind of knew what I wanted to go and work on and kind of create and do stuff. And actually, it was so rich, that kind of space of like, don't check your phone first, because you're immediately on someone else's to-do list. As soon as you check someone else's phone, you're on someone else's to-do list. Wake up in the morning, open up your own piece of paper and choose what you want to do next. And only then check your phone later.
Yeah, I spend way too much time answering emails, that's for sure. I want to move on to another question I get a lot. And whenever I meet people and they find out I work in travel, they immediately tell me of this dream trip they want to do, but almost always say, oh, but I'll never be able to do that. And it's interesting because, this is something, the first thing they want to tell me is, and often they have very planned out, they know exactly why, they have a connection. And, there's obvious barriers we have with, money and responsibilities and family and whatnot. But there's also a way, you can kind of make things happen that you want to happen, and you can find an excuse not to do anything. There's always an excuse for everything in the world. And so how do you help people who say, okay, I do want to do something different? And, I use travel, it can be anything, but I do want to do something different. But then they just see, dozens of barriers.
Well, with my individual kind of work system, what I do is I get them to look at how they've survived up until now. And usually there's markers in there and that tells me ways they've kind of shut down to survive their past. So it is a little bit of kind of therapy in that we go, okay, so I want to understand more of their reasons why they don't think they can do it. And usually there are markers when I ask them and go, okay, so tell me a time where you felt like completely misunderstood, judged, sad, and that you thought, I never want to be judged like that again. I never want that experience to happen. I don't want to feel that shame again. So I'm going to do this to stop that ever happening again. There's usually markers of those in our lives. Well, everybody's life, not usually. There are always those markers. Some people say there's 3. I say there's 300. Like times where you go, oh my goodness, that was awful. I never want to feel like that again. So I'm going to learn from that and I'm going to go forward. I believe they are a very big factor in stopping us daring and dreaming big and then taking that action. Because we've survived, like our subconscious is going, you've survived up until now, not doing those scary things. So why would you want to do that now? And our brain is wired to survive. So if we want to understand what is really stopping us psychologically, like you said, there's always an excuse. There's always a reason. And even if it is a war-torn country, even if it is, got wild animals, even if it's got, like there's no money to do it, there's always a way. And the way is through, in my opinion, like the exciting thing about fulfilling a dream that you think, well, that feels ridiculous. How on earth am I going to do that? The way to that is the adventure for me. That's the thing that gets exciting. So it takes, the way I do it, it takes, creating a safe space and asking the right questions. So it's not completely straightforward doing that. We need to find someone who you feel safe with to explore that type of questioning. But there's usually a moment where you go, oh yeah. So for me, one of my moments was like, okay, I'm leaving home. I'm independent. I'm off. And that feeling of independence, was great. And it's enabled me to do lots and lots of things in my life. But it's also stopped me from asking for help. Because the reason I left home was because I wanted to do it myself. And I didn't feel like I could always rely on others. So, right, I'm independent. I'm off. Meant that I was cutting myself off then from the future of going, okay, but if I asked for help, then that might be great. Because I felt so sad about asking for help previously and not getting it, that I was like, I'm independent now. So it becomes a strong suit, it becomes something that's really powerful for you. It's a suit I can put on and be Miss Independent and it gets me results. But I miss out on that connection with others when I put on my independent suit and don't ask. So there's usually little bits of things like that. It's not a soundbar, unfortunately, that I can give you how to fix that. But there is juice in there. There's a piece of gold that allows you to go, and that enables me to go forward by addressing that fear.
I guess one thing that comes to mind here is lots of people have dreams for these incredible trips or these, life-changing events. How often in your work with them do they realize that actually maybe their dream changes, as they work through it with a coach? And it's like, actually, the dream of, going to be, live on a beach for the rest of my life. Actually, as I worked through it with you, it's totally different now. Actually, I want something that's maybe not that.
Loads of people who come to me who feel like really overburdened, want calm, chill. They want to be in the woods. Don't talk to me anymore. That's it. It's like, I want everything gone. And then they go, oh, actually, if I just think about that for a minute, then there's none of that. Then there's none. Maybe I don't want all of that. Maybe I'll evolve it in some way. But then some people just go. So I moved to Italy in 2017. I moved to Italy. My husband and my 4-year-old at the time, and we just went. We got rid of everything. Like, I had like 20% of my possessions left. It was great. I still had my house, which I rented out to somebody, but we went. We put everything in a van and we went. That was it. We thought that was it. We thought we were going to live in Italy for the rest of our lives. And then just under 2 years later, 18 months, 2 years later, we were home again. But I don't regret having tried it, because without trying it, I would never have known. And I didn't know how the bureaucracy would be. I didn't know that my 4-year-old would refuse to learn Italian and just become quieter and quieter. And my extrovert child would become very quiet and not speak to anyone. And I would come pick her up from school with a pile of drawings because she hadn't spoken or learnt any Italian or refused to do anything. She's a very good drawer now, which is awesome. But she got this new skill. But without trying it, I wouldn't know. So much of the time it's suck it and see what happens. And I think most people don't regret having a go. Most people regret not even trying. So it's finding a way for them to try.
It's fine. There's two things I wanted to ask. And the first one was kind of this idea of not framing every decision as binary, as black or white. A decision isn't forever. In your case, moving to Italy, you can change your mind and maybe it's inconvenient.
It was expensive, but...
Yeah. I just think trying to sell all your stuff and packing up a house, geez, that would be a terror. But it was also this interesting of like this fear of failure, or this fear of taking a chance and starting these life-changing goals. Can you maybe talk about what you've seen as the outcome of people who go through this? And, is it all, hey, this was really great. I'm really glad I pursued something that was, challenging, that I wanted to be part of my life, or are there some dangers to doing this?
It's so individual, Richard. It's really hard to speak for everybody, but I think the way I witness people's experiences is like, you can't ever change the past, can you? We all make the best choices that we feel that we can in the moment, based on our past experience, based on advice, based on our gut feeling, all of those things. So I think your mindset and working on your mindset and going, okay, am I up for trying this even if it doesn't work out? So having that as a precursor to making any big choices. And the word choice is very important here. It's super useful to be present to the power of the word decide and the power of the word choice. So if you think about the word decide, the last 4 letters in the word decide is all to do with killing stuff off, like pesticide, homicide. It's about, this is just one path. The rest are dead. I don't have any other choices. It's just, this is one binary, like you said, decision. Life just doesn't work like that. There's always options. Like, you either smoke or you don't smoke. That's a decision. You either put the cigarette in your mouth and pull, or you don't. What I'm going to do with my life, there's so many options, so many details, so many things you can never foresee. It's really hard to try and control all of it and go, right, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get this result and this is what the outcome's going to be. We just don't have that much control over our lives, in my opinion. We just don't. We can do the best that we can and be present to what we can control. But when we have a strong mindset of I'm up for this, even if it completely screws up, I'm up for seeing it through. Let's just see. And I think if you can frame it in that way for people, it's much, much easier for people to take those small steps and then realize they're going before they've even noticed.
That leads on to another discussion with kind of dealing with the adversity in life and dealing with resilience. And, you know, a lot of people, that's something they struggle. You know, they had a trip that went bad, or, you know, they're struggling with their fitness, and sometimes they just want to give up. How can people build resilience to deal with the setbacks, whether or not it's training for a trip, planning a trip, being on a trip, you know, coming back from a trip?
Again, it's preparation, I think. I think preparation around being aware of what you can and you can't control, being your own measure for stuff, like being clear about what your intrinsic motivation is, like what you feel, like your internal motivation is. Like, I want to do this for me, because I want to do it, or I want to do it because my parents will be proud, or I'll get that marker and then that woman will love me. You know, like, what are you doing it for in the first place? Like, actually, if you have a healthy reason to do something, no judgment on people doing other things for other reasons, but I think personally, just as an example, like Italy is a very small example. You know, once you've done it, it's not that hard. And I think most people say that. You know, I've coached people who've been up Everest, and they're like, it's not that hard, really. You know, you've got all this team around you. Yeah, it's tricky, but it is just putting one foot in front of the other and staying present to that, and like not running ahead with your thoughts, not going back and regretting. And I think anyone who wants to do like a stretching experience of life, if they can get a mindset that is really supportive and kind to themselves, like, but allows them to be honest to themselves, but also supportive, I think that is the key, really. You know, I've coached people who are really hard on themselves and very driven and perfectionist, and it's a hard nut to crack. We get there, but it's a hard nut to crack, because there's a story of it. It has to be better, and I haven't quite reached success yet. Like, if you're craving success and some feeling, you have to exercise the accomplishment muscle. Like, you have to applaud yourself along the way, not like, well, I'm not there yet, because you'll get there and then you'll just move the goalposts. You won't feel that satisfaction later either, because you haven't exercised that satisfaction muscle. I've coached people who are massively wealthy and successful, and they've come to me because they don't feel it. And it's like, because you're uncomfortable with acknowledging yourself. And it's a really small thing to do, but it's so uncomfortable for some people. They're like, oh no, it feels horrible. I can't say that's great because I doesn't feel it. And I'm like, okay, well, let's come back to, like, what if your friend did it? What if your friend's kid did it? What if your kid did it? You know, like, how would you feel for them? Like, oh, I'd be pleased, but I don't feel it for me. And it's like, okay, well, there's where your work's to be, is to allow yourself. Because most people want to feel that feeling of satisfaction and success, but it's always just over the horizon, just over there. So chasing that, it will always be over the horizon unless you practice that sense of satisfaction. That's what I believe, anyway.
It's almost just slowing down and acknowledging what's happening. I just think,
yeah,
there's so many times you do a great trip and then immediately you don't think, oh wow, we just did this great trip and it was really pushed our envelope. It's like immediately, okay, let's find something even harder now. Let's go to a higher elevation. Let's go longer each day. And yeah, it's nice just to reflect, hey, look how good we did. We were healthy and we did this trip. And yeah, it's kind of nice to slow down and just acknowledge the good things more.
Yeah. So I call it having a to-do list. So you have a to-do list and you also have a to-do list. And it's like just going, I did that thing. Isn't that great? You know, and I invite my clients to have a daily to-do list. So you write down exactly what you're going to do that day on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side later that day, you say, right, this is what I did with my day. And this is what I included. And this is also what took time. You know, I chose to play with my kids for a bit. I chose to take my neighbour's dog for a walk. It isn't like getting me to up Everest or whatever, but it's what I chose to spend my time with. And this is how much time I had in my day. And then the next day, or that evening, you can write down what you want to do the next day again in your to-do, but then you open up your book and you always have the left side, which is what you said you were going to do, and on the right-hand side, what you did do. So you can just flick through when that book is finished with all that to-do on that right-hand side of everything that you've done. And it's joyous, actually, just to go, wow, I did all those things, and that's lovely. When it just is a really nice way of acknowledging yourself, and like acknowledging the bucket list that you've already done as well as part of the process. Doing things full spectrum, Richard, I think is really powerful. Like looking at what you want to do in the future, yeah, but you have to look at what you've already done. You have to see the whole full spectrum of that to really get the power of it.
That sounds like great practice to, just to start to pay attention to what's going on. I want to switch gears and talk about, you have an article where you share how time outdoors eliminates stress. Definitely something I know intuitively have felt for, a couple decades. But can you talk more about how people can reduce stress and anxiety? Because that seems to be the most common thing I hear and, you read about, and even with children, they're talking about it. And it seems to be really pervasive in our culture. And so what can people do?
So again, I'm a real advocate for pen and paper. Just being able to put your devices away and just get a pen and paper down and just go, right, okay, what is happening with me right now in this moment? What can I be grateful for in this moment? And what have I done already today? And it's like, for some people, it's just if they're feeling super anxious and everything is overwhelming, it's like, okay, I got up and I picked up this pen. That's an act of survival for some people in that moment. But then it's a matter of going, okay, in this moment, you are here. The future hasn't happened yet. The past is already gone. Looking at regrets, looking at what should be in the future. That's where your misery is, in my opinion. So in the moment, anxiety doesn't happen in the moment without thinking about the past or the future. It just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist without that thought. You don't have an anxious lion. You just don't. Lions don't do anxiety. And if you're an antelope, you get chased and then you have a really good shake and then the anxiety's gone again. So somatically, being able to move your body, whether it's inside or not, anxiety and kind of jumping about and moving that adrenaline out of your body is really powerful. And then just writing down what you have in this moment and break it down into pieces and just go, okay, this is what's possible for me in this moment. And this is what I can and I can't control. So the Stoic model of philosophy is really powerfully useful because you go, okay, this is what I can control, which is what I say and what I do. Over on the opposite side, everything I can't control, whether it rains, whether the sun comes up today, like everything over there. And everything in the middle, we have the sphere of influence, which is where someone says, I love you. It's where, you get a great job interview, you get a smile from someone in the street, everything in that middle bit, you influence life, but we cannot control it. And I think we try and set goals in that sphere of influence and think that we can control it when we can't. We create it as a possibility. There's so much more space for magic and appreciation of the powerful serendipity of life when you go, wouldn't it be wonderful if this happened? Not like this is going to happen, otherwise it's going to be awful. It's like, okay, it's possible that this can happen in the sphere of influence here. But then you go back to the bit that you can control. It's like, this is what I say and what I do. This is what I can control. So if someone comes to me and says, right, I want to book 3 new clients this week. And I'm like, okay, that's a possibility. I cannot guarantee you that. But what can you do to make that most likely? And then we look at what that pattern is, and then we take that action. And then when it happens, we go, yeah, that possibility occurred. Not like, well, of course that should happen, and why hasn't it happened earlier, and all that story. It's like, if you're again in this mindset of like, I can't control that, like you can't go into a tennis match going, I have to win this match, I'm going to win this match. It's like, okay, I will play my best. I will rest myself. I will eat the right stuff. I will be super present. I will play its match as if it's my last. I will just like be in the moment. You see it in like sport when people lose it, don't you? Like a tennis match or something. Their mindset is ground down. You think they're good at this, they've gone. They've already lost the match. They're finished because you can see that the story is bigger than the present moment. They're like, oh my God, I'm losing it. I'm going to lose. So you can see in other people how important that is. So yeah, acknowledging what you can and you can't control really, I think, helps reduce anxiety. I think we try and control things we don't have control over. We can influence them, we can't control them. And I think we're given this illusion that we can control so much in life. And it's really stressful for us as human beings. And it takes a lot of the joy out of it. So that's what I believe anyway.
Beth, it's been great hearing, your insight into a topic I actually don't know very much about. And so but what surprised me is how much comes back to strategy. And even what you talked at the end, it's this idea of emergent strategy where it's pioneered by Professor McGill, where there's so much that goes on in the world, like having a strategy that's going to last for 10 years, you're going to follow to for 10 years, it never works because tomorrow the world's going to change. And that always really resonated with me because having spent my career in startups, life is always different. And what you think is going to happen almost never happens. And competitors do things and regulatory does things. And, this idea of just like kind of go with the flow. And it sounds like not only is that good if you're trying to build a company, it's also good if you're just trying to live a happier life.
Very much so, very much so. And like the easier you can be with like uncertainty, I think that, the more comfortable you can be with uncertainty, the better. So if you're planning a big trip and you haven't quite got like all the funds or everything, but you really want to do it, if one thing it's free is to work on your mindset. So that when you are on that trip and things get hard, you'll be able to handle it much better. Like there's an amazing woman I know called Nuala Moore. She's a cold water swimmer and she's like swum the Bering Strait and stuff in a relay team, and she's like swum all the way around Ireland. And she's just like, we've had such great chats, and like she lives in my husband's hometown in County Kerry in Ireland. And we've had great chats in the street about, she was like, yeah, my body, I train it as well as I can, but it's all up here, Beth. It's all in my head. Whether I can swim around the whole of Ireland, it's all to do with what my head is. So it's just like, if I believe I can do it, I can do it, and I'll find a way. So that is where I always help people and get them to start. If they want a project, like, well, let's play with your mindset and get you to enjoy it and enjoy those comfort zone stretches, enjoy those different ways of being, and enjoy the ups and the downs, because that's how you learn. That's how you enjoy life and don't suffer it when things don't go your way.
What a great way to end the podcast. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing all this expertise, Beth.
Thank you so much. I've had a really lovely time.
If people want to learn more, you have a treasure trove of articles on your website. Where can they find you?
So my website is www.bethcreedon.com and .co.uk. I have both domains, so whichever one you want to find. I'm also on Instagram, Beth_Creedon, and on Facebook too. But yeah, I share lots of things through my website. I offer group coaching, and I do one-to-one coaching. It's my bread and butter because I love working one-to-one with people.
Excellent. I'll put links Beth mentioned in the show notes. And with that, thanks for listening to this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. We'll be back next week to explore the world and hear about more epic adventures. Start planning your own adventure by visiting us at 10adventures.com and listen to other episodes of the 10 Adventures podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you find your podcasts.